Right, moving on now, this is the population size versus the quantum that we were provided. Okay, so the Crown picks a number. There is no justifiability or algorithm around it. Somebody in some Crown agency determines for a minister to make a call. The call of commercial settlements are broken up into a number of settlement pools, and then you aggregate them all. The biggest and the first one is what they call the commercial settlement. And the Crown determined very early on that Hauraki whānui as a collective would never get any more than $100 million. They then throw that on the table and then force the 12 iwi to fight over it, right? But there are systems that allow you to identify how to get a proportional share of that. So firstly, we didn't agree to the 100 million, but there's no such thing as consensus. We just got outvoted. Because the loss in the Hauraki was quite high. Not to Ngāti Pro, but when you're looking at a quantum, what Ngāti Pro's strategy was to acknowledge that there was big loss, not solely to Ngāti Pro, because we got a double penalty. Because the vast majority of our whakapapa is anti-sales, will not sell their lands, and held onto them. Whereas in the Ngāti Maru groups and others, land was individualized into little groups and then they sold, right? So it's one of the largest sellers of land in Māori land court history. That's not an indictment on them. That is just how impoverished they were at a given time, and the rest is history. So, because it's a matter of fact, it's a matter of hectareage fact in the Māori land court jurisdiction. And so we suffered a double jeopardy because we held on and didn't monetarize at an earlier stage. And then Māori land title, getting finance to drive it and get away with it, etc., was always deemed as a second-class asset. And John, I see John there, he'll more than be ready to acknowledge the difficulties and bankers and everybody else, even Māori affairs on Māori land. There's the quantums, okay? And so we ended up with 2.5% of the $100 million. And that meant that from the get-go, we were on the back foot trying to raise our quantum, okay? And as soon as that was struck by a vote at the Hauraki Collective, ultimately agreeing to it, and when you do the numbers, you'll see why. It's because the Marutuhu Collective comes out extraordinarily well. And I would have voted, if I was one of them, I would have voted that way too. You with me? Yeah, who cares about Ngāti Pro? So, but you've got to look at it from their side of the fence too. You with me as well? Which I get. So my fight isn't with Marutuhu. My fight is to ensure that Ngāti Pro gets a fair and honourable settlement with the Crown, with the New Zealand government. And so I just don't get into bluing with them on all sorts of things. We've let them go first, and they've picked the eyes out of everything. But guess what? There's so much there. There's just so much available that there is always, at the end of a settlement process, a significant opportunity. Right now, today, not one iwi of the Hauraki has settled, despite the fact that the Hauraki report was laid down at Taratokonui in 2005. Okay, so 16 years down the track, that hasn't occurred. And if you look at Uncle Shu filing our collective claim in 1986, this is a huge, laborious journey. And we probably would have expensed $100 million collectively across the whole of the Hauraki anyway, in pursuing our rights. That's the way that works. So there's the numbers for you. You can quickly do those. We'll do a number of other graphics now to just show that the way that quantum worked is unfair because of us being the fourth largest iwi in the Hauraki. Now, population on fish distribution quotas, inshore and deep water has an algorithm as to what we're worth, and the same as in treaty jurisprudence. But we just couldn't elevate ourselves out of a 2.5%. This plays out, ladies and gentlemen, in the Hauraki Collective legislation, to which we will be one of the 12 iwi, but we will be a locked-in minority against the vigorous majority, and that makes it very difficult in the long run. So how does that play out? I'll show you when we get to the offers that were provided by the Crown from 2013 on, and bring you up to speed on that. Here's the first offer that was made to us. So we can't get off the 2.5 mil, right? That 3 million, I don't think is necessarily correct at 2018, but I stand corrected. So the first offer in 2013 was $2.5 million, which is the financial commercial redress. And it went all the way through to 2020, right? We rejected the 2013 offer out of hand because there was no cultural revitalisation, and all other iwi had a whole range of things in what they call cultural redress as opposed to financial redress, okay? And then you see where in the 2018 offer was 380 hectares coming back to us. The majority of that, 370 odd hectares, 368 hectares was in Haratonga. Okay, and that's conservation estate that is to come back, and it is on the other side of the Haratonga stream, the conservation estate, going heading towards the upper reaches of Tokotia. And so that was to come back as part of our cultural redress. What you see in the 2020 is, and now these dollars are dollar values that we would get, and then I need to go to the next couple of slides to tell you that whilst we're trying to build up from that 2.5 million, right? And the reason for that is that we're looking for assets that have long-term earning capacity for Ngāti Porou on a commercial level, and or into the future, which can be monetarised better by our mokopunas. So not another acre to be sold anywhere near. Mataura's never sold an acre because it's an incorporation, because it's deemed by the people there to be held in trust for everyone. I'll come to that shortly. Whereas at Haratonga, whānau is rightly so partitioned, okay, over time. So what was on offer? All the best schools in the Hauraki were picked by 11 iwi ahead of us. And so when we got to the table, the only ones left were in Waihi. So there might be an allegation that because Mataura is just sort of 7.5 kilometres away from Waihi Central, that there was a sway that way. That's not true. When we went to the table from Ngāti Hako all the way through to Patukirikiri, et cetera, and Coromandel, had got first digs on the schools. Okay, and what happens is that the school is sold to the iwi, and then there's an immediate lease back. The return on the leases can be as low as 4% and as high as 6%. Okay. Now, in a low inflation environment, as we've had in the last 10 years, that's a good return. In a higher inflation environment, you've got some problems, and you've got a right to review the lease once every 7 years. The net result of those two schools, we wouldn't go near the Waihi District Court. The reason for that is it's a heritage, has a heritage zone of 1 or A, and that means there's just nothing you can do with it. you're not allowed to alter it, even in terms of the internal sides of it, right? And the maintenance of it, et cetera, just isn't worthy. So what we were looking at doing is buying Waihi Central School, Waihi East School, and that would be returning to us as a runanga around, on today's dollar values, about $240,000 a year in rent. Okay, that's just a constant putia into the runanga. So in terms of the 3 offers, we'll go through them soon, but this is the commercial address way we were going to do the commercials. What you have to understand is that we would put all the money in one putia and try and use that putia to purchase more assets. Because it's not about us today, it's about setting in place a substantial balance sheet that our mokapunas can be proud of, and then will ensure they retain their connectivity to our maraes and our maungas and everything else, okay? Now here's the collective redress. Now, when you hear the term collective redress, it means we're one of 12, okay? We're one of 12, and we have 1 vote. So the establishment of the Pari Hauraki cultural entity, that goes to the Hauraki Collective, full stop, okay? So we're in grave difficulty there. When you look at the Waiho, Piako and Coromandel Catchment Authority, once again, we're excluded because we're on the Tai Tamahine side of the Taroatika. Okay? We're not on for the Tikapa Moana side, we're on the eastern seaboard. And so those authorities we are deemed to be excluded from, even though we're in the collective as a 12th. The vesting of all of the maunga, or the tihi of all of the, from Moiho to Charoha, will be vested in the 12 iwi. Okay, so it is correct to say post-settlement for any Ngāti Porou ki Hauraki that they can use, Moiho ki Waho, Charoha ki Uta, and all the rest of that, because at the end of the day, we will have vested in our name the tihi of all of those maungas, okay? Now, where we, there's a site of around 8,000 square meters over on Ahuau, where we are one of 6 iwi that have a say in that site. And they're the other iwi there: Ngāti Maru, Ngāti Hako, Ngāti Hei, Ngāti Whanaunga, and then us, 5. Okay, so there's 5 of us. And so we have to form a joint trustee committee, and we're in the process of endeavouring to do that shortly. But understand this, because of our proximity to Ahuau, there will be a lot more excursions by Ngāti Porou from Kennedy Bay there, solely because we now have landing rights and entitlement rights. And there's 8,000 square meters there. There's also a existing jetty in place being maintained by DOC. So we get, in effect, a 5th share of that. But once again, we're part of a collective of 4 other iwi plus ourselves. Okay, so we just going quickly back, because I think the whānau just need to get a look at others. So the Wairako Stream Conservation Estate and the Haratonga Stream Conservation Estate, you started to see, remember where those hectareages are available. Those are not collective, those are Ngāti Porou as of right. And that's in the Kennedy Bay, Haratonga area. If you look down now to the next, so these are cultural redress, okay, ladies and gentlemen. If you look, I'll just go back up one here. If you look down at the next, we wanted statutory acknowledgements for whakatata, kaipaua. And the reason for that is because they whakapapa in one of our more tiers to Tokotia. And Uncle Paki's research provided us with the authority to get a entitlement or right there. That also safeguards our people into the future in terms of natural water flows and water catchment areas. All right, because I don't know what's going to happen with water. You don't, but we have to future-proof our settlement. And so to do that, the runoffs from those mountains become extraordinarily important. And that's why we were looking for a statutory acknowledgement of Ngāti Porou's history, linking us through those mountains into Tokatia. And in Tokatia, koinaki, kuhutara. The relationship redress is just protocols with government agencies, right? And that gives us a right as a runanga to have a relationship. So that's the cultural revitalisation program of $1 million for the Dr. Paki Harrison Scholarship and the Mataora Marae restoration. That is an attempt to lift our investment envelope, for the want of another way to put it. And the reason why we do that is because our 2.5% slayed us. So under treaty settlements, you get significantly discounted access to land. So if you have a look at the investment envelope, we go from $2.5 million to $3.5 million to $4 million, right? And that amount of money then gives us a right to buy some significant dock estate. And why it does is because the dock estate is valued at unimproved land values, right? And then you can, and as a consequence, you can get some good lands. Now, we wanted, for instance, next to Pitu Bay is Red Beach. Well, there were 5 hectares there. Unimana near Whangata, 5 hectares there. What would they cost? If they're under $300,000, they come across free. If they're above that, well, we'll have to look at the dollars. But when you look at them, when you look at those sites, within the next 15 to 25 years, they'll be right for a commercial redress shift. You with me? So that's why we're trying to box a lot clearer there. Okay, we'll move to the next slide. Sorry about being laborious with you, but I'm trying to ensure that those that come after you and those that view that have been on this journey and see this as just another day at the office, it's not. It's a very complicated and complex process. And because we've been part of it, it's water off a duck's back, but it's just not. It's very tough for our iwi whānui to come to terms with the bullshit that we've got to put up with in terms of this whole process. Right, if you now look at the Crown Forest Rental Trust, once again at 2.5% going forward, we'll be a bit taker out of those states, all right? So at this particular point in time, because that's not Ngāti Porous, it's the collectives, it places us in a difficult position. And that's the Crown Forest Rental Trust transfers of Athenry. Athenry, Hauraki gets 40% of the Athenry forest being felled as we speak. A significant part of the Waiho, because they share that with Waikato. Koiranga, Tairua, Whangamata, and Whangapua forests. Okay, come back. Now, another part of settlements is a right of first refusal. So you'll hear RFRs, right of first refusal. The only properties left when we got to the table were not in Thames, Coromandel, Whitianga or elsewhere. They'd all been bespoken. The only lands available, as you can see, were in Waihi, but like the schools, and for the same reasons. And so nothing can happen with those lands if the Crown is moving to sell them or develop them. They have to develop them for housing purposes, for social housing. If they develop them for anything else, we get a right to buy them at present value. Okay, right. So this is the package that makes up our settlement. Right. So the next, and just keeps going. That's rights of first refusal, and they're predominantly all over state houses in Waihi. Okay, so the next slide is. So there's the there's a summary of what certain iwi are getting back in regard to the settlement. Okay. So Ngāti Hei's up there, and it's close to 2,000 hectares coming back. Ngāti Maru around about 900 hectares. Tamatara has done extraordinarily well, 4,000 hectares coming back, right? The Ngāti Porou domains in our hands that we've never sold are close to 3,500 hectares. So that place, you've got to understand our mana, right, in terms of Māori freehold land. And when you start to see the lands coming back, you'll get an idea of how outstanding our ancestors were, who had to leave and were impoverished, had assets that were being pursued vigorously to buy, but held the line so we can have this discussion today. So that's the lands that were deemed to be coming back, right? And that was from the Dock estate. Now, this is the offer that caused us greatest consternation. We call it the Balkanization offer. In the Balkans, it's the old Yugoslavia, okay? So you have Serbia, Herzegovina, Croatia, and they've got very tight lines where you're in effect penned into a enclave, right? And in Māori tikanga terms, and it's just, that's just not true, okay? So that was the latest offer, which we rejected, and it has been presented at no less than 2 other special general meeting and another AGM. This is the 3rd AGM, okay? And so we cannot accept a settlement map that looks like that. We have shared interests outside those areas, absolutely, both because why that was done like that is to curb Ngāti Porou's rights when we come to a debate on the distribution of fisheries assets. Furthermore, it was done like that to curb our MACA, our foreshore and seabed argument, entitlements, right? And I'll finish, Mr. Chair, on that. I'm sorry, Whānau, for taking so long, but it's important that you should blanch at that, okay? Because if you look at our cultural associations, if you look at our standpoints, you know, our Ngāti Porou pā was in Whangamata on the road out, heading to Tairua. You'll see it. That's why it's called Ngāti Porou Place. We have footprints across Te Tarotika, and the beauty about them is that they were uncontested. You know, it was just through tomo and whakapapa and all the rest of it. It's just, that's why we've never been contested until the 2000s. Right, so we'll just quickly move on now, Bev, to the next slide. Now that slide identifies the areas of where we're heading for our customary marine title, okay? That's our, there have been 2 High Court cases that have been delivered. One on Pahuwera. Pahuwera is the hapu that has marine rights, title and land for Ngāti Kahanunu, and they're just south of our Ngāti Porou border. Okay, and then a High Court case has just been delivered on that, and the High Court case has also been delivered on Whakatohea. And those 2 cases actually reinforce significantly our Ngāti Porou rights and entitlements, significantly. So we're in the High Court on that and in direct negotiations at the same time as well. Okay. Okay, the next. So these are the areas that we're seeking, in effect, a Māori marine reserve entitlement over. And then we regulate the waters and the kaimoana within those Ngāti Porou marine reserves. Okay, so Haratonga will have it, Ngāti Porou and Mataura will have it. They are tighter because it's a different right, okay? And believe it or not, in the next slide you'll see you know, it's deemed a land grab, right? So in our title, and luckily in Matara, in our title, we have 20 meters into the high water mark, So in effect, that because it's an ocean beach, it stops any non-whānau landings. It's as simple as that. And so when you start looking out where we will be heading, we'll be heading to marine rights and entitlements immediately in the inshore. What the Whakatohea case and the Pāhuera case alert us to is we can push further out. Okay, we can push further out in terms of rights and entitlements. So this is all part of the Runanga's negotiations. Okay. So that sort of gives you an idea of. I think somebody's done a concrete factory there for Haratonga to monetize things. So that'll cause a few problems for the mussel farm. But the point is, you know, that is merely a graphic to say exactly where our rights and entitlements will start to lay as we start to push out. Of course, other iwi will try and contest us, but their problem is they're sold. How they sold and were pressurized to sell is another story. That's what the settlements are about. So I'm sorry to have labored this because I wanted a video so we don't have to run through the lot. So remember, there's commercial redress, financial redress, they call it sometimes. Then there's cultural redress. Then there's statutory rights and entitlements. Now, the statutory gives us strong rights that nothing can happen on those mongas or areas unless we've been fully consulted, briefed, and part of the journey. Then you drop down into what we call statements of cultural association. That's like the Cody Point one, okay, where it's a statement of historical importance to Ngāti Porou in terms of its connectivity to the Tauranga Moana peoples. And then you get into the collective redress, and we have some significant issues there as one of 12. Now that concludes the update. Where are we now?